Textile Education Landscape, Laura Edmunds, Cardiff School of Art and Design. Research demonstrates that textiles is a subject in decline, and this has been further documented with the significant changes to the national curriculum and its impact on textiles education. As a result, recruitment to textiles degrees is also declining, with this ultimately impacting the wider industry as textiles struggles to make itself relevant in a complex world. This exploratory paper seeks to understand the challenges facing current textile education, identifying pedagogical approaches that will reinforce the significance of textile design as a discipline within the 21st century creative education. Whilst it is important to acknowledge the overall difficult financial landscape impacting many universities in the UK at present, there is still a decline specific to textile programmes that is informally discussed amongst textiles academics at UK-wide events such as New Designers, the Association of Fashion and Textile Courses, and academic conferences. To understand what is happening in textiles education in universities, we need to unpack what is happening in schools. The funding cuts made by the government to creative arts subjects within the national curriculum have been widely criticised, with notable arts leaders declaring concern since 2012 and campaigns led by prominent artists and organisations as published in the Arts and Schools report by Cultural Learning Alliance in 2023. Whilst this articulates a much needed focus on the arts in schools more generally, textiles is still subject to prejudice due to its gendered role in society and is not championed within the arts, as argued by textiles theorist Elaine Igoe. Hemmings, Abrams and Igoe each report that it is often viewed as a subject for the less academic, an easy and relatively simple subject that has roots in gender performativity, such as homemaking and domestic activities such as sewing. The Textile Skills Centre published a report on the future of textiles education in the United Kingdom in 2024. The report shed light on the curriculum reforms that have taken place since 2014, where textiles is no longer available as an independent qualification. These changes have seen textiles embedded into either design and technology or art and design textiles qualifications. Whilst this does indeed demonstrate the multifaceted and complex nature of textiles, it could be argued that it diminishes the visibility of textiles as a subject and further reinforces gender stereotypes as reported in a gender equality review by the Department for Education in 2015. There is a reluctance to study textiles from male students, as documented by Solomka, with 0.2% of male students taking GCSE Design and Technology textiles and 0.1% of male students taking art and design textiles. And it's acknowledged that whilst textiles and fashion are not gendered subjects, there is gender performativity and stereotyping at play. Coulter states that this gender imbalance in schools permeates higher education, which is further reflected in industry. However, academics and practitioners working in the field understand its dynamic and boundary-pushing nature rooted in history and technology simultaneously. From the perspective of a textile design higher education institute lecturer, it seems there is a disconnect between the interpretation of the subject at school level and of that in higher education and the industry. The complexity and peculiarities of textiles methods and practice means that pedagogically, the approach between the design or art route differs significantly, as they champion only one aspect of a subject that exists in multitudes. Textiles is a subject that can be applied to art, craft, design, and technology, as it is used to create decorative, functional, and technical surfaces that require a high level of skill. Embedding textiles into two different overarching subjects restricts the possibilities and presents a limited interpretation of textiles. For example, creativity is prized in art and design textiles, but design and technology is assessed with technical skill and precision, with some D&T teachers reporting that they feel it isn't important to teach creativity, but instead provide step-by-step instructions to make a prescribed outcome, such as a cushion or bag, that secure results due to pressures from management and Ofsted. Design and technology often views textiles as a support to fashion or product design briefs, often constructing a garment or a product such as wearable technology. These tasks confuse textiles and fashion, limiting the scope of textile design as a subject. In doing so, textiles has become a fractured and misunderstood subcategory within an already threatened subject area. In showcasing what the final outcome will look like before students embark on their project, there is little room for creativity, despite its well-documented impact on the learning process. Whilst it is acknowledged that technical execution is a core skill within textiles thinking, the creative process of play and tacit knowledge is essential to develop innovative approaches to designing and making. The report additionally showed that school pupils gain limited exposure to textiles, with just 53 hours at Key Stages 3, and primary school pupils taking part in 30 hours of textiles education over a 6-year period. This puts us in a dangerous territory and threatens us with the loss of textiles as a subject in schools, higher education, and research or industry. Often, teachers of D&T have not trained in textiles specifically, with many teachers stating that they lack confidence to introduce textiles methods to their students. Whilst the Textile Skills Centre and the Design and Technology Association offer resources for teachers, they do not position textiles as a subject ripe for innovation and exploration of tacit knowledge in varied contexts, such as footwear, well-being, or automotive industries. Most industry projects or resources that are offered by the organisations are focused on either fashion garment construction, industrial design, or engineering. This is a pattern highlighted by IGO, as much of design's academic discourse is shaped by the analysis of architecture, industrial design, and engineering, with little articulation of textile design practices. Design education discourse has been unfolding for the last 50 years, with frameworks and theories supporting and challenging design perspectives ranging from human and user-centred, critical design, and emotional design. Whilst textiles is written about from a cultural or historical perspective, textile design theory is slowly emerging over the last 10 years, but it's still in its infancy. This is acknowledged by those working in textile design. It's an anonymous and generally misunderstood as a subject. Textile designers are hidden from view, and most people do not understand what the textile design process entails, even though almost all human beings live their lives entirely in or adjacent to textiles. Comparing this with the visibility that other design disciplines have, such as fashion, architecture, or even ceramics, textile design as a subject seems to hide in plain sight. Whilst textile design archives are maintained, often designs are not attributed to a particular individual and fade into anonymity. The purchasing or usage of textile surfaces from stores or in public spaces are anonymous, existing without a name or a signature, and are instead designed to assimilate into the object or brand that they are applied to. IGO writes about textiles as a mute, dutiful mother and the giver of life to design applications and objects. Much like the wallflower at the school dance, textiles is ever present and observing while not taking centre stage. In the face of course closures and low recruitment, it is imperative to establish specific textile design theory and accompanying pedagogical approaches to this. So what is the goal of textile design education in 2025? For textile design at Cardiff School of Art and Design, it is to become agile, flexible makers and thinkers with the ability to navigate an increasingly complex world. Brockbank and McGill write that the most useful learning in the modern world is learning about the process of learning, an internalisation of the experience of change. By embracing speculative design and problem-based learning into the curriculum of textile design at Cardiff School of Art and Design, we have sought to embed a culture of exploring future possibilities. As IGO states, that design problems for textile designers are not just ill-defined, but unknown, and at best entirely tacit. Savin, Baden and Major write that learning how to learn is a primary goal of problem-based learning, with deep learning, as opposed to surface learning, achieved through collaborative approaches that prepare students to live in a complex world. Open-ended, problem-based learning seeks to challenge, disrupt, or expand upon a 21st century problem. As textile designers, our students are going to graduate into an industry that is causing significant problems for the planet. Students are encouraged to consider the potential impacts of materials, technology, societal influences, and environmental challenges for varied contexts beyond domestic interiors and women's wear collections. Articulating textile thinking within the curriculum, working collaboratively and with interdisciplinarity, has been a priority within the course, expanding on the many unspoken practices or tacit knowledge inherent within textile design courses up and down the country, such as iterative sampling, problem solving, mood boarding, colour swatching, specific drawing methodologies, and substrate and fibre knowledge, for example. This work needs to be implemented at school level to give a clearer view of the potential of textiles as a subject to pupils when they are making their GCSE and A-level choices. The Textile Skills Centre report calls for more continued professional development for teachers to understand textile design education, not just for art making using fabrics or garment making for fashion. To begin this, PGCE students and newly qualified teachers from the South Wales area were invited to Cardiff School of Art and Design for 2 textile design workshops to introduce methods of textile thinking that could be adapted for the classroom. The workshops were designed to include the breadth and potential of textiles, whilst also addressing innovation, application, and material inquiry, informed by the evolving industry and research projects such as Mar and Hoyes, who wrote that textile design is constantly expanding into a more interdisciplinary practice, and educators need to keep abreast if they want to teach their students emerging skills. Problem solving is often pitched as a form of play within the textile design process, whether that's by 2 or 3-dimensional materials and processes, in pursuit of creating effect through a print that delights, a tactile sensation, or expressing a mood. In designing the 2 workshops, this approach to play through the handling of materials was prioritised, with open-ended instructions limited to connect and combine verbs, such as to link, to knot, to loop, simultaneously embracing risk and uncertainty during the creative process. Additionally, the workshops were designed to have no defined outcomes, but instead participants were asked to generate play types, a term introduced by Mar and Hoyes to highlight the innovation and experimentation inherent within textile design processes. This workshop offered participants the opportunity to create new and hybrid outcomes from existing materials using the instruction Combine and Connect. In designing this workshop activity, problem-based learning was implemented. Participants were to set the context of connecting and combining existing materials, with the wider problem being overconsumption and textile waste. Participants worked in small design teams where they could share their prior understanding of textiles and problem-solving skills. Incorporating unconventional materials ignited discussion, as participants were surprised to not be working exclusively with cloth and thread as they might have expected. Materials selected were repurposed and ranged from plastics, metals, wood, and paper, whilst the methods of combining materials were limited to non-sewing methods of connection, using cable ties, eyelets, knotting, tying, staples, and hole punching. Designing the activity to be open-ended meant that participants had to engage in a sense of play as they generated tacit knowledge through handling materials to understand their properties. While some participants were initially nervous of perceived failure, it quickly became understood that as there was no expected outcome or solution, there was less pressure of getting it right and more focus on thinking through making. As Mar and Hoyes write, a design project that is too planned does not challenge existing design cliches. In freely experimenting with connecting materials, participants were then asked to create mock visualizations of potential applications. This included footwear, backpack, car seats, and healthcare items to demonstrate the range of applications of textiles, but also to provide examples that are gender neutral, moving beyond items for domestic interiors or gendered clothing. In the second workshop, participants were asked to create simple drawings of shapes from the workshop around them, looking at flooring and functional details such as light switches or plugs. Highlighting the mundane and observational was a means to communicate two key textile design processes, collecting and translation, as identified by Igo. The collection varies for each designer, but is often cited as a core behaviour of the textile designer. Igo writes, the types of objects that textile designers sometimes collect, buttons, old headscarves, bags, stuffed animals, feathers, scraps, car booty, are everyday objects, and it appears that the criteria for inclusion into a textile designer's collection are hugely broad. Working from their collected shapes, participants were given waste materials and engaged in a process of material play that encouraged the translation of 2 dimensions into 3 dimensions, with a focus of engaging the tactile senses. During the workshops, participants were surprised by the open-ended possibilities of working with textiles and by the variety of materials that could be used. Feedback from these exercises included how they challenged their understanding of what textiles was and could be, as they initially thought they might be making a small item, such as a bag or a pouch, and using a sewing machine. But they could also see how these workshops could be accessible without having no prior textiles knowledge. Moving beyond the prescribed design outcome, such as a length of fabric, into the undefined outcome, makes room for the innovative potential that textile design has, and prepares students to work in this manner as they navigate a complex world and the challenges of the wider textile industry. This paper has sought to reveal that whilst textiles continues to be taught in 2 different subjects at school level, there is a need for teachers to develop confidence in teaching textiles through continued professional development as the multifaceted subject that it is, as well as the need for resources and support from specialists in the textiles field, such as academics and designers. Ultimately, this paper argues that textiles needs to be reinstated as its own independent subject, but in the meantime, there is scope to foster connections with schools and colleges to provide resources and guidance and training on methods for teaching textiles in schools. There are limitations to this initial activity. The number of participants was at the threshold for tangible data to be collected, and so continuing to build networks for teachers is a priority. However, participants developed new knowledge and understanding of a subject where preconceived notions were held, and their perspectives of textile design had been positively influenced. In highlighting what is missing from existing organisations providing textile resources, there is potential to build a specific textile design resource that provides materials for teachers. Offering open-ended approaches to design will build on strengths of Textile Skill Centre and Design and Technology Association, but combine both pedagogical approaches to accurately reflect textile design methods. This paper hopes to contribute to the evolving discourse around textile design thinking and textile education, with scope for further study. This project shows the value that the resources and projects that celebrate the multidisciplinary nature of textiles could have within a school curriculum, working across STEM as well as art and design. Embedding projects that navigate the gender bias and demonstrate the potential and breadth of textiles could have positive effects on students in understanding the options available to them for further study and identifying careers in the textile industry in the 21st century.